Okay, that brings us to the adrenal glands. So there's two adrenal glands, right? And if you recognize this picture, that's like the urinary system. So you have kidneys, you have ureters leading from each kidney, which is just a tiny tube, to the bladder where urine is stored, and then it's released through a tube called the urethra. So sitting right on top of those are the adrenal glands. So they're like little toques that keep us warm in the wintertime. Right? One adrenal gland on each kidney. The kidneys, a lot of times, they're referred to in the term, using the term renal, like we have a renal artery and a renal vein that feed both the kidneys. So adrenal just means basically above the kidney. Okay? If you take a kidney and you slice it and you look inside, you see the chocolatey covering and the nougaty center. So they definitely have like two distinct areas. You have a cortex or covering and a medulla or middle area. Okay, the cortex will secrete all kinds of hormones. The medulla will secrete kind of two really important hormones. Okay, so when we look at the cortex, it secretes actually three classes of hormone. So the main heading on those classes are the glucocorticoids, so things that have to do with some sugar. Okay. The mineralocorticoids, which have to do with some other minerals in the body, including using minerals to balance water. Okay. And then some sex hormones. Okay, so there's quite a few hormones that they secrete. The ones that we are interested in for our course are cortisol and aldosterone. Okay. Okay, again, when we talk about sex hormones, including the testes and the ovaries, which are also endocrine glands, we'll refer to those in the reproductive system. Okay, so that's the outer covering. And then the middle medulla, which is directly stimulated by the nervous system, secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine, which are just other words for maybe something more common that you've heard of, which is adrenaline, like when you have an adrenaline rush, and noradrenaline. They both do the same thing, but they function a little bit differently. What those do when we're talking about an adrenaline rush, we're referring to the fight or flight response. And the reason that it's called the fight or flight response is because especially when you're talking about animals, they're either going to, they're faced with some really stressful situation. Maybe a predator is jumping on them or whatever. So they're either going to fight for their life to try to get out of that situation, or they're going to run like crazy, right? And in either case, they're hoping to prolong their life, okay? So the nervous system, like when you see and hear and maybe sense something that's attacking you, your nervous system is, remember, it's that rapid response. So it's going to rapidly kick this into gear. So it's going to dilate your eyes so you can see. It's going to open up your the bronchioles of your lungs so you can breathe more. It's going to increase your heart rate so you can deliver oxygen and sugar to all your muscles. It's going to direct the blood flow to your muscles and away from your digestive system and the internal. It doesn't need to go and digest food. Man, I just need to run, right? And so it does all that like instantaneously with the sympathetic nervous system, that speeding up nervous system. Okay, and one thing it also stimulates is the medulla of the adrenal gland, and that's going to release this. Now remember, nervous system's the phone call. This is the mail, snail mail. So this is now released into the blood, and it's going to go to all those places that I just mentioned to prolong, right, and maintain that fight or flight response. Which is why when someone jumps out at you and hey, scares the living bejesus out of you, right? That's why even a couple minutes later you're still going, oh my Lord, you scared the heck out of me, right? Yeah. Because the adrenaline is still attached to those receptors in those places. It lasts longer, and sometimes it lasts quite a long time, depending on what the stimulus was. Right? You're just in a car wreck or something like that, and all of a sudden, like, you have that adrenaline rush, and in some cases even go into shock. But you have that adrenaline rush for quite a while. That is the medulla. That's its response to prolong that and to get you out of trouble. Okay? So now once that all calms down, then usually because of a fight or flight response, you may have had some damage. Okay? And that's where the other part, the cortex of the adrenal gland, comes into play. I always call this your stress hormones, right? Stress response hormones, and this your stress recovery hormones. Because in the most cases, that's why you're releasing this, is to recover from a stressful situation. Now, the glucocorticoid in particular that we're responsible for, cortisol, is going to make glucose available. So we say it increases blood glucose, right? So we now have some energy, so we can use that to repair ourselves, and it's also going to make amino acids available. And amino acids are the building blocks, that's the Lego of the body. It's the building blocks of repair and growth and all that kind of stuff. So if we have some Lego and we have some energy, we can rebuild. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And if you think about it that way, it's a pretty simplified version, but that will answer most of your bio questions about cortisol.
Oh, okay.
Okay? The mineral corticoid, aldosterone that it releases. So if in our fight we got shivved, right, and we're leaking blood, what's going to happen is our blood pressure drops. Okay? And it's designed to maintain or kind of bring back our blood pressure. So if we think about the kidney, and remember inside the kidney were these little guys that you learned back in Bio 20, which we call the nephrons, right? Which are the filtering units of the kidneys. Okay? And so blood, remember there's about 1 million of those inside each kidney. So blood is coming in here, and it goes through the little glomerulus, the little cheesecloth. Things leak into the nephron, which then, like if I draw the kidney, here's a nephron, right? And it's going to dump into that collecting duct going this way to the renal pelvis, which is like a funnel, which then goes down the ureter to the bladder. So we're going to take stuff that's leaking out of the blood and we're going to funnel it down and pee it out. Some things we want to get rid of, some things we don't want to get rid of, okay? And we can control the amount of water in our blood, the amount of blood pressure we have, by changing the permeability of the distal tubule of the kidney. So this part, distal tubule of the nephron. So that part, we can change the permeability to water, okay? Because normally this then wraps around here and goes back out the kidney. This is in, this is out, okay? And so as we filter things in here, the rest of the blood and the things that are too big will go around and stay in the blood, right? So we're going to filter things like water and sugar and salts and some minerals and urine and uric acid, all those things that are bad, and any good things, we reabsorb them in here and in here. Mostly water is reabsorbed here based on how much pressure we have. And right here, there's like a little pressure detector.
Okay.
So if our pressure really drops, then we're going to want to reabsorb even more water here, okay? And the way that happens is the little messenger will send a message up to our adrenal gland, right? And it's going to say, hey, my pressure's dropped, got anything that will increase my pressure? And the cortex will release aldosterone. And aldosterone is going to come back, and it's going to change the permeability of this to salt. So it's going to increase salt reuptake. And because salt is going into the blood, water always wants to follow it, right? Because now you have a low pressure area or low concentration of water in the blood. So then it increases water reuptake or reabsorption. Okay? So it's going to do that in a two-step fashion. It's going to send a message here. I just got shivved, my pressure's low. It's going to send aldosterone back to the kidneys. Again, it's an endocrine hormone, so it's going to travel through the blood. It's going to get to the kidneys. When it gets to the kidneys, it's going to act on this portion of the nephrons, of the million nephrons in the kidneys, and it's going to say, hey, suck back some salt into the blood so that the water follows it, and it stops that loss in blood pressure. So if you think about that fight, prison fight, right? This gets me ready to fight and flight. This then gets my pressure back up because it got shivved. I get to the doctor, he stitches me up, I'm good to go. And then this helps me heal, rebuild. A little situation, a little imaginary situation. Hopefully you're never in prison. But imaginary situation that maybe will help you remember what the parts of the adrenal gland secrete and what those hormones do. Okay? This is one in particular that has a negative feedback loop with the hypothalamus pituitary complex. And so I'll draw that out in a minute. Capiche?
Yep.
All right.